given to SLS with a few more details now that we've actually started the process. So what we'll do is we'll go through these individual sections. I'm going to have Sergeant Hardy and Sergeant Twyman come online and briefly discuss the workflow of the contractors, and then we'll be open for questions. So the contractor role, these medical admin contractors, or MECs as we will refer to them through on out, they manage the applicant medical processing. So the intent of this contract is to take the administrative burden of chasing down medical records off of the recruiter and put it on these contractors. What we were hearing is that the recruiters were spending way too much time trying to track down medical records, trying to request medical records, trying to keep an eye on their applicant and say, have you gotten XYZ yet? So what we decided to do was implement these contractors to help out with that. The contractors will have access to Genesis and HIE, so they can pull documentation from Genesis and JLV, but more importantly is this HIE access. So what they'll be able to do with the applicants is before the applicant even hits MEPS, they'll be able to review HIE and see what are the potential disqualifications that the applicant is going up against, and subsequently help obtain medical records for those potential disqualifications before they even go to MEPS. What this should do is reduce the kickbacks from the CMO and subsequently reduce the kickbacks for medical documentation from the waiver authority. So in the long run, it will speed things up. But what we're doing is we're shifting that heavy burden, that administrative lift to the start of the medical processing versus waiting for it as it's requested. The MAC will also facilitate any required corrections. So if things are submitted incorrectly, like if pages are upside down or if they're out of chronological order, things like that, then they can help make those corrections. And then they will also help with the med waiver submissions. So they'll coordinate with my office, RSOPs, RSOG. We're one and the same, and it might be changing again soon. So if you see RSOG or RSOP, same thing, no need to get confused about what RSOG is. But they'll work with my office to make sure that everything that is required for the medical waiver for a disqualification is uploaded in AFRISS when it comes to medical documentation. So that's a very important caveat to understand, is that these medical admin contractors get medical documentation. For instance, there are some disqualifications that you don't need medical documentation, but instead you need school records. Well, it'll still be on the applicant to go get those school records because our medical admin contractors are only there for the medical documentation. So just keep that caveat in mind. So we'll really quickly, these next 4 slides, the 4th slide is just a graphic depiction of what these next 3 slides spell out. But there were some analysts that got involved. They pulled some raw data and they looked at the raw throughput of each MEPS. For Guard, Reserve, Active Duty, Space Force. They looked at how many number of applicants went through each MEPS. And based on that raw throughput, they decided how many MEPS earn how many contractors. So these MEPS right here each earn 2 contractors. They're definitely your larger MEPS. The next slide shows the medium MEPS, if you will. They each earn 1 contractor. And the way I say what I mean by medium with quotations is medium by MEPCOM standards and by AFRS standards doesn't mean medium by the contractor standards. So again, the way that the contractors were allotted to each MEPS, oh goodness. I don't know if I'm still online. I apologize.
You're still good, man.
Okay. I lost the VPN, so I'm trying to reconnect.
And this is Bob in Spokane. Can I ask a question while we're waiting?
Sure.
The MAC's going to notify the recruiters they need records. Once the recruiter obtains those records, how will they get back to the MAC?
It should all be done through AFRISS, and so that'll be part of the workflow that Sergeant Hardy and Sergeant Twyman discuss. But the MACs will also have access to AFRISS. So anything that is uploaded in AFRISS, the MACs have access to. So if the recruiter uploads anything, the MAC has access to that. and they'll be able to.
I understand that part. What I'm saying is once the recruiter obtains the records, is the recruiter going to notify the MAC that the records are uploaded in AFRISS, or are they going to notify us to notify the MAC?
That is a good question, and one that I don't necessarily have an answer to right now because I don't think we've encountered anything like that. I would say it can be email communication between the MAC and the recruiter. Because the MAC, if the recruiter puts a notification in AFRISS, he can't, or he or she cannot notify the MAC yet. There's an AFRISS release that's coming out in December and January, but they can't notify the MAC. So if they put something in AFRISS, it'll notify the LNCO. The LNCO can then notify the MAC, or what I would recommend is honestly the recruiter can just email the contractor and let them know, like, hey, this whatever was requested is uploaded in AFRISS.
Okay, yeah, that was my question, really. To once they start their communication, are they going to stay communicated until the documents are resubmitted to their level, or were we going to have to be the go-between?
No, I would say if the MAC, and Sergeant Hardy and Sergeant Twyman, correct me if I'm misspeaking, but I would say if the MAC reaches out to the recruiter and says, I need this documentation, then the recruiter should be able to just go directly to the contractor and say, hey, I uploaded it. Does that sound fair, Sergeant Hardy and Sergeant Twyman?
Sounds correct. I would say they could also hit them up on Teams if they wanted to be a little quicker than email. They're always on the Macs are on Teams all day, so we communicate through Teams every day, and it's pretty quick getting a response back from them.
Absolutely. And Teams might actually go ahead.
I just said okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Ma'am, I have a quick question. This is Sergeant Denise 342nd, always squadron. Sorry for my voice. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So just to clarify, the MAC is essentially going to tell us we need X, Y, and Z after we submitted 2807. And then we as recruiters still have to go to the individual, make sure they have the organized documentation and submit it to the MAC so the MAC can then send it to the CMO?
If the MAC cannot get it themselves. So the MAC is responsible for obtaining medical documentation. So what our MACs are doing right now, and we'll discuss this a little bit more during the workflow, but the MACs are going into JLV and Genesis to download any medical documentation that they can find related to potential disqualifications. They are also, if they see like someone had an ACL tear in, I don't know, 2021 at some hospital in Florida, what they can do, if they have the hospital's name, they can actually reach out to that hospital and request those records. The only time they should be requesting records from the recruiter or the applicant is one, if they absolutely cannot get them, like say the facility refuses to release the records to the MAC, or if they just need additional information on where to get those records from, they can reach out to the applicant and say, hey, who did you see for this ACL surgery in 2021? Or if there's documentation that is not medically related, so like your school's transcripts, copy of the IEP, any sort of applicant statement like for allergies, then it would have to come from the recruiter or the applicant themselves. But as far as medical documentation, that should be primarily tracked down and uploaded into AFRISS by the MAC. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we essentially just submit a 2807 with what the applicant has submitted, and then the MAC will go and hunt it. Once they have it, they would then, within the system, send it to the CMO without reaching, as long as they have everything, of course.
Well, yes, and so it will go through the LNCO. The LNCO is the one who pushes it to the CMO, but we'll discuss those details after these slides.
Oh, sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
So again, these are the MEPS that earned one contractor just based on raw throughput, and then these are the 29 MEPS that didn't have enough raw throughput to garner even one full-time contractor. So when the analysts were looking at the analysis, were looking at the raw throughput of these MEPS, they came up with 11 contractors for these 29 MEPS. Some obviously have more throughput than others, and that's fine. It kind of balances out to the 11 contractors. As of right now, and I'll skip ahead because where I'm going, this is the graphic depiction. As of right now, we have 13 of the 63 contractors trained. So this contract should have 63 total contractors. 60 will be out in the field, 3 will be up at headquarters. Of the 13, we have 8 of the 11 that are supporting these 29 MEPS currently trained. And so they are actually right now just supporting all 29 MEPS. We had 2 briefings on Monday and yesterday with these 29 MEPS to get them trained up. And so these 8 contractors are supporting all 29 MEPS as we speak. We also have 3 supporting local MEPS. 1 is in San Antonio, 1 is in Dallas, and 1 is in Houston. And then we already have 2 for the headquarters. Backing up a little bit, the contract was awarded in September of 2023. This was a very fast-moving contract, one that I was very impressed by. The idea started in July, and it was awarded September of 23, so it was very, very fast-moving. The training consists of all contractors coming to Randolph to get their government-furnished equipment, so like their laptops and their docking stations, and then all necessary training per their contract. And so it's usually just like your sapper training, your active shooter training. They're also getting MHS Genesis training from MEPCOM. So we have individuals from MEPCOM who are training these folks on how to register applicants in Genesis and query HIE and how to review HIE. They're also getting some training on AFRISS from our AFRISS folks here at the headquarters building, but a lot of their AFRISS training is going to be on the job. So it's one of those things that we have to put them out there and we have to get them going once they're trained up, and they learn as they go, which is why we have to have these meetings with the LNCOs after the contractors are trained, to make sure that the LNCOs understand their process and can help train the contractors or at least guide them with their questions. But yeah, the training takes about a week at a time. Our next one won't be until after Thanksgiving just because there was no one available to be trained this week, and then next week is Thanksgiving. But that being said, one of the biggest issues that we're having with these contractors is getting their CACs. The investigation phase for people fresh off the street is just taking a lot longer than anticipated. Other than that, I have your 3 group cores down at the bottom. And I've been speaking with them, just giving them updates and making sure that we're all working together to make sure that this is a success. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sergeant Hardy and Sergeant Twyman to give you a brief overview of what the workflow for the contractors are.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Master Sergeant Hardy. Please let me know if you can hear me okay.
Good to go.
Awesome. All right, so I'm going to be going over the workflow portion up until it is submitted to the contractors in our teams tracker. So from the beginning, the process is all going to start at the initial appointment. So the recruiter is going to sit down with the applicant. They're going to fill out their pre-screen forms that are part of their initial appointment. These forms are then going to be used by the contractor to generate their Genesis profile if they don't already have one. So that's going to be the 2007-2, the 2005. It's also going to be the 40-8-1. It's going to be all the pre-screen packet forms because most of those forms, if not all of them, are required to generate the Genesis profile and then look at the medical records that will be required. Now, once the recruiter submits that to the liaisons like they normally did with their pre-screen process, the liaisons, instead of sending it directly to MEPCOM to start the pre-screen process, they'll be sending it to the contractors to do their part first. The main reason we're doing this way is we already have an idea of what the applicants already disclosed. When we generate their Genesis profile and load all their HIE after 48 hours, we'll also know what records are missing from that. So there might be an applicant summary report which shows all the things they've been diagnosed with, treated with, going back as far back as we have any records for. But some of those records might not have come over with HIE, so it only have a summary but no records with it. The contractors would then be able to go in there and contact those clinics directly because they usually have a clinic that they were treated at without the records included, and they can gather those records first. Once they have all that and they have everything they think will be required by the CMO or whoever's reviewing the packet at MEPCOM, they can then upload all those records in AFRISS, and then us as the LNCOs would then submit all of that to MEPCOM for them to do their pre-screen process. Now, our hope in this is that we'll be able to mitigate almost all of those kickbacks for additional records that the CMO or ACMO or any of the medical providers would be requesting, and then get those applicants on the floor faster. So We are dependent on either MEPCOM generating the DoD ID number to just generate that Genesis profile, or some MEPs have been able to generate those DoD IDs a little bit earlier. But that's one of our biggest timeline hurdles, is getting that DoD ID number, just like we do for complex pre-screens. With that, do we have any questions on that part of the process?
Hey, this is Surgeon Spencer at LA MEPS. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey. So, thanks for explaining the process, especially with the LNCOs tied into it. My question is, when it comes to them creating the Genesis profile, which of course will take something off the HRA's hands and the MedTech's hands, how do we know when recruiters currently run simple pre-screens and they run the HIE on the floor? Sometimes the CMOs, many times, will find things in the HIE, review it on the spot, and just decide, no, we don't need a med read. This is good to go. How will the MACs know what things they see in HRA and HIE warrant to be ran as a complex versus go ahead and just send this through?
So great question. So we are providing the MACs with the DoD that the CMO is going to be referencing to disqualify or qualify people, as well as the SMDR, which is additional document or additional requirements that they usually recommend the CMO gather to make their determination. We also provided them with all of the SG recommended documents for waivers as well. So it's not just going to be a process for the pre-screens. If there are any additional meter requests that come back, our MACs are also going to gather those records. And then even after they've gone up, let's say they go up to MEPS and they were a simple pre-screen and there's nothing that came up in HIE. And then they identify as actually on the floor, you have all these scars and we need to know the records related to this that didn't come up with any of these reviews. Our MACs are then able to gather those records from those clinics if we're able to get the clinic information and then get that for waivers as well. So they're supposed to be our holistic solution to try to address all the records issues we've had throughout the process. And then when it comes to doctors determining on the floor that they're good to go with all those records, there might be a couple of instances where we gather some of those records expecting it to be something we need records for, and then we don't. But our turnaround time on that is in the singular days to get those records for most of these requests. So in the long run, it's going to save us a lot more time than it loses us. Hopefully that answered that question. Please let me know if it didn't.
No, it does. Thank you. And I think someone responded in the comments that recruiters are not going to be mandated to use a MAC, right? Because I can just see, and I'm sure we've all seen, sometimes recruiters are like, I'm just going to send it there and wait for those documents, which is why we have this now, so we can find out what we need beforehand. But will they be mandated to use the MAC for everyone that they meet?
As of right now, we're going to be recording all pre-screens to go through the MAC. But right now, our turnaround times are 1, 2, maximum 4 days to complete the whole process for simple and a lot of complexes. So it's not going to, we don't see it impacting stuff significantly on that front. Now, there could be adjustments later on because it's still a new process, but that's where we're currently at.
And Sergeant Hardy, if you don't mind, I'm going to tag on to that. Like Sergeant Hardy said, this is a brand new process and we fully expect things to adjust and we'll adapt as needed. But in the beginning, we do need people we do need recruiters to submit their applicants through the contractors, so that way our contractors become proficient in the process. So it's one of those things where initially we might see things slow down as our contractors are learning and honing their skills with this process, but it will speed up. And so we will adapt and adjust, but for right now, we do want as many as possible going through the contractor, so that way, like I said, they can become proficient in their job.
Right. Do we have any other questions on that part of the process from anybody?
Hey, sir, it looks like there's a few in the chat. If you can grab those?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer the first one. It says, will the recruiters be building the pre-screen packets in the Genesis required order for the contractors? Additionally, will the MAC be uploading the pre-screen packets into Genesis? So for the first part of that question, recruiters will still be required to do a pre-screen packet. Now, all that is just the forms from AFRISS. The medical records, if there are any, will be on the MAC side. They will be the ones putting all of the medical documents in chronological order and say, if anything's found in Genesis and that gets pulled from a medical facility, but the recruiter also uploaded medical records, the MAC's responsibility is to grab all the records out of AFRISS and merge them together into one document. So the recruiter's responsibility is only the forms. But the MACs will not be uploading like a pre-screen packet into Genesis. All they're doing is doing the HIE pool, seeing what's in there, requesting the medical records, and then saying, hey, everything's good to go. It can go to the CMO, or we requested medical records. And once those are done, they'll put that information into AFRISS for the recruiter and the LNCOs. So if once all the medical records are in there and the 20-07 is good, the LNCOs will then forward that to the CMO with the pre-screen packet and the medical records that the contractor put into AFRISS. And the background of the MAC, Major Catrine, I know at a minimum these had to be medical administration background. Do you have any more information on that?
Correct. The job is medical office clerk. At a minimum, they had to have 6 months working in a medical facility as an administrative position. Some have way more experience than that. So that's the minimum background that they had to have. They are hired as medical office clerks, though.
Hey there, this is Max Representative Farrell for the 3.2nd. As far as the Max requesting the medical records, are they also obtaining the prior service records?
Yeah, this is a total force thing. So guard, reserves, officer programs, enlisted side, everybody's going to be going through this. So if they're submitted up to MEPS like they would anybody else, that's going to go to the CMO for review. They're going to go through the MAC right now to get things pulled so that we could already have it ready for the medical team. And we just recently had a prior service come through the MAC side, and they were able to see all of the previous medical issues from the applicant. And the applicant actually didn't put anything on the 20-07, and they found a whole bunch of HIE stuff from their previous service. Sorry, Hardy. Were you done with your part? You want me to move on and talk about how the MACs will go through it so we can explain that part too?
Yes, sir. So if you want to take over, we'll hopefully answer a lot of these questions we have in the chat.
Yeah. Okay. So how it works is after the LNCOs will submit all the information for the applicant onto our tracker or into AFRISS, they'll submit it. We have an update coming in December where the LNCOs at MEPS will be able to submit the pre-screens to a transmitted to MAC bucket, and then the MACs will work out of those buckets. Now, the consolidated MEPS will still have to operate off of a tracker that we have. So as of right now, we have everybody's information on the tracker. Once the DoD ID number is in there, the MACs can create a Genesis profile for each individual. MACs are going from oldest to newest. They're not kind of picking which MEPS they want to work. It's just whatever's in there, oldest to newest, it's ready to go. They'll create a Genesis record. They'll do an HIE query, and then they wait 48 hours because that's what MEPCOM guided us to do. They said that some things can still hit the system after 48 hours. So we wait 48 hours for the HIE query for the second one. In the meantime, after the first query, if they find anything, they're already going to be using the 680-3A-2 to request medical records from facilities. So the big thing is for everyone is to make sure that the applicant's information, their address, their email, their phone numbers are correct in AFRISS. Their 680-3A-2 needs to have the correct MEPS information, whether it's an address, fax machine, phone number, because this is the stuff that they're using. if they can go ahead and send something out, the medical facilities, we've seen medical facilities send medical records back next day. We've had it to where it's in 2 days. So on average, we've been seeing around 4 or 5 days return time from the medical facilities. Now, there are some that are a little bit slacking just due to the medical facilities not wanting to work, or they're saying it's going to take 6 to 8 weeks. And we've already kind of initiated a new process for that for the LNCOs. But if they mail them, it might take a little bit longer. But in that process, if they can't find something or they can't get a hold of a medical facility, the MACs will put a remark to notify the recruiters that they've been reaching out to the applicants. They'll reach out through Teams and kind of do like a virtual consult where they'll set up a Teams meeting. The applicant will dial in just like in this meeting, and they'll have a conversation. Where did you go for this issue? Do you know what hospital? Do you know what doctor? Do you have records for this? And they'll just kind of work around it and figure out what they need to do. And then after that call, they'll keep moving forward with the record request. Once they've completed it, they'll put on the tracker, or once the new update comes up, it'll be in a completed MAC completed MAC bucket in AFRISS. That will be where the LNCOs will see it there. And they can either, hey, we need to update the 2807, or it's good to go for the CMO. And if the complex pre-screen or simple pre-screen packet is in AFRISS, they can just go ahead and upload it into MERS to submit it forward to the CMO review. Any questions on that part? Okay, I'm reading that most recent question. When the MACs review the 2807s and request documents, what happens if they discover something that wasn't documented? Are they reaching out to request those documents as well, or are they going to submit to CMO and wait to see if they request additional documents? So again, they're going to go off of the requirements from what's qualifying, what's disqualifying or whatnot that they already have. So they're not going to just randomly chase down records that aren't needed. So if it's nothing that's too major and it's already been documented, they're not going to worry about it too much. They're going to go after the serious things that are disqualifying factors. Just like Sergeant Hardy said, they have those. They have the documentation to bounce off of all the medical conditions that we look at MEPS every single day. So they're going to base their decisions off of that. They're not going to do it off of their own mindset. So with that being said, if they find something in the HIE, they will request those records. And they actually have a review document. So if they find new HIE that's not on the 2807, they'll upload that. It's like a Word document into AFRISS. And it actually explains, here's the ICD codes that we found additionally to the 2807. So if it is major, you might want to update the 2807 so it matches Genesis. But if it's something minor, we wouldn't worry about it too much.
Real quick, just scrolling up through the questions real quick. The PWS, I believe the group cores have that. If I will verify that they have it. If they don't, I will send it to them and they can disperse as they see fit. So the PWS is out there, and I believe it's with the group cores. If not, I'll follow up with them.
To answer that question of when does this become mandatory to send to the MACs, everybody who's currently participating across all the shared MEPS, it is currently already mandatory. So,
and to piggyback on that, when you know it is mandatory is when your MEPS gets trained. So that previous slide, I said the 8 contractors are working the 29 MEPS. And we'll send these slides out. I don't know the best route to send these slides out. If anyone has any suggestions for sending these slides out, please just let me know. I can upload it somewhere. That way everyone has the contractor locations. But those 29 MEPS, they were trained Monday and yesterday, and so they're active, they're live, they're good to go. As we train contractors, we are doing a follow-up training with the affected MEPS, and once the affected MEPS is trained, they're live and they're good to go. So it's not like everyone becomes mandatory at one time. We can't do that just because we don't have all the contractors trained yet. So unfortunately, it's a slow rollout as we get the contractors trained.
All right, to answer a couple more of these questions, so does that require a new 2007-2 before we LNCO submit to the CMO? So if there's not enough changes on the 2007-2 to warrant reaccomplishing the form, there's nothing stopping you from submitting. You don't even have to reaccomplish if there is a couple more things that pop up, because just like when it goes to the medical providers right now in MEPS, if they deem that it is qualifying with what was not disclosed but what they found in HIE, they'll just press on. We'll leave it up to the LNCOs and the recruiters to determine if they should reaccomplish it. If you send up a simple pre-screen and you turn out there's 18 HIE hits, it's going to make sense to reaccomplish that form. So at least it looks like the applicant made an attempt to fill it out correctly. But we'll leave that all up to the LNCOs and the recruiters to decide. Let's see, looking at another question here. So for timelines for the MACs to complete their initial review, we're still working on what's reasonable and realistic. This is the first week we had 29 MEPs in the shared pool. So we're not going to start having that data to how much time they should have to do this until we start seeing everybody utilizing it. So it's going to take us a little bit to determine what that's going to look like, but it's been pretty favorable with the MEPs that have participated in getting those back in a realistic time frame. All branches are not currently doing this. It's just us. So we're the trailblazers here. Any questions on that so far? I've been kind of rattling off these questions.
I just saw this most recent one. They have 2 of the 29 MEPs that are supposedly now online. All 29 MEPs were briefed this week, so they should be live now. They should all have access to the tracker. And if they didn't attend the training, then we need to know so that way we can update them on everything. But all 29 MEPs do have access to the tracker. They do have the training. So if you'd like to get with us offline as well, sir, we can figure out which MEPs those are and try to reach out to them. But they should be using this now.
For start days for the rest of the locations, for the single contractor assignments and the dual contractor assignments, that's all going to be relative to how long it takes those specific contractors that have been hired for those locations to get their access. So I'm one of those locations that's waiting on one contractor, and I won't know until we have them come online as well. So please be patient with that. Once we start getting them, those MEPs will be notified, and then we'll be getting started with those MEPs by doing the training.
And Sergeant Lafferty just read your question there. So when it comes to how we upload things into mirrors, it's the exact same way that all LNCOs are still doing it currently. The only difference in this program is the front end. So really, at a minimum, all the contractors need to do an HIE pool is a 2807 and that form 680-3A-2 filled out. They can look at HIE, and once they're done with it, that's when we initiate the original way that you route stuff through mirrors. So it'll be the exact same way it is now. You upload a complex or simple pre-screen packet, and then you upload your supplemental medical records as a separate form into mirrors. And then the HRAs will upload all of that stuff into Genesis. And yes, we can send the a copy of the workflow for the MACs. We can send that out when we send the slides.
We would share the workflow on this meeting, but it is humongous and it's really hard to read. So our feedback has been that it's not been helpful that pull it up on the team. So once you do get a copy of it, definitely take the time. It's a lot of scrolling with different swim lanes. So yes, please read at your leisure. Do we have any other questions from anyone else?
Yes, sir. So I have a quick question. This is again. So how should the verbiage be when it comes to an actual request? Obviously, we have the pre-screen. We put all pre-screen in the pre-screen packet. When it comes to, obviously, before we say, hey, complex pre-screen, please review, submit to CMO. What should we say now? Please review, submit to MAC.
So you can keep the exact same process. Those LNCOs will just know to submit it to the MAC first. And then when they get it back from the MAC, then they'll submit it like the normal process. So you'll probably see some remarks from your LNCOs saying that it's currently at the MAC. And then the MACs are going to put in AFRISS with the remarks when they're complete. So the recruiter will be able to see all the updates throughout the process. So this should be pretty transparent.
I also saw will max process certain general waivers if needed for OA, as we currently have recruiters push to SG, but it sounds like the max may take over. So they're not taking over any submissions to anyone. That is still on the liaisons and the recruiters who currently operate those procedures. The max are solely looking for medical records. They're looking at HIE. So if say the SG kicks something back saying that they want more medical records, that's when the MAC can get involved. So same with the CMO. If the CMO kicks something back saying they want more, the LNCOs will send all of that stuff back to the MACs to say, hey, the CMO is requesting these medical records, the SG is requesting these medical records. They'll help the recruiters find those additional documents, and then we can attach that back into the system, either send it to the CMO or send it to the SG like normal.
Hey guys,
Hopefully that answered.
one of the questions that someone just asked to follow up on that, when we are sending to the MACs as LNCOs, right now the only place we actually have to track any type of pre-screens is our pre-screen bucket sent to the CMO. Do you know if Must and his team are going to create some type of bucket for pre-screens sent to the MAC?
Yeah, so that's already going to come out in December. So I think December 7th, is that right, Sergeant Hardy? December 7th is when the release is coming out. So the current consolidated MEPS are using a Excel tracker basically right now. And that's what they'll continue using until we can get AFRISS updated a little bit more. But for the MEPS that are going to have the one MAC or the two MACs only to their MEPS, there's a bucket that's going to be created. So under the pre-screen bucket that you have now, all the names just kind of populate under them when they request it. You're going to be able to right click and say submit to MAC. It's going to go to, there's going to be 3 folders. There's going to be one that says transmitted to MAC. There's going to be one that says completed by MAC, and the other one is going to be returned by MAC. So that's where you'll go to track what's been going through and where your applicants are.
And for Colonel's question, Colonel Soman, we do not have names until a couple of days prior to the training. So what we are doing, as quickly as we can get those names, we're also reaching out to the MEPS and training the MEPS, and then passing on that information to one of the LNCOs or the MEPS POC that's identified. And so that way the contractor and the MEPS POC can establish a relationship as soon as training is done. Another side piece of that is the contractors that are supporting a local MEP, so that let me back up. The 11 contractors that are supporting 29 MEPs are all located in San Antonio. They're just like a pool of contractors, and so they're working first come, first serve. The contractors that are supporting the MEPs directly, so like Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, within the contract it states that the contractor must live within 60 miles of the MEPs that they are supporting. So because of that, what we're also saying is that within the first week or two of the contractor completing their training and being assigned to that MEPS, they must have a MEPS site visit with their LNCO, just to further building that relationship. So unfortunately, we don't get names until a couple of days prior to training, but as soon as we do get those names, we're trying to pass out the information so that relationships can be made between the contractor and the MEPS. Oh, and then who the contractor is with. Yeah, so they are working for AFRS, but the contracting company is Muskogee Staffing Solution. So it's not LHI.
Did we miss any other questions? I know the questions are kind of flying up, and I know we were trying to scroll back up to catch some of them, but did everybody's question get answered, or do you have any others? I will say additionally, when your MEPS starts this, make sure that the field is briefed on this correctly, because we are having contractors who have reached out to the applicants. They've put remarks into AFRISS saying looking for applicants' response, sent email. And as the liaisons, you have to also kind of reach out to the recruiters like, hey, I don't know if you saw AFRISS, but the contractor's looking for your applicant. So we need to make sure we're briefing the applicants that, hey, you might get an email from an Air Force contractor for a Teams meeting, something like that, to look into medical records. It's not a scam. Please respond to that. As well as recruiters, keep an eye on AFRISS, because the contractors are working in AFRISS and they are putting remarks in there. They are notifying people. So we need to make sure that we're monitoring that as well. And this will Max be reviewing existing applicants to CMO requested docs? Yes. Currently, at the beginning we weren't doing it, but now we have kind of released everything. So anybody who is working with a MEC currently is allowed to do that stuff. So if the CMO's requested docs, the MACs can help pull those records. If the Surgeon General's office has requested records, the MACs can help pull those records. There are things like our ADHD stuff that they can't get to, like school transcripts, things like that, that they'll still need the recruiters and applicants to help obtain. Pharmacy records, I would also right now tell them, hey, we need you to go ahead and start pulling pharmacy records. I would go ahead and start pulling that in the get-go. That way they're not doing it in the back end. But yeah, they will help with those things.
Hello, sir. It's Bob in Spokane. Did you guys get or find out an answer on where they're going to be faxing records to? To the flight office makes the best sense, but since the contractors won't be receiving records directly.
I'll jump in on this. So I'm actually discussing it with Chief Rawls up at headquarters, and we're getting with RSI to see what the best move forward is. So we're still working it. More to come on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and Colonel Soman, I see your comment there. Definitely what we'll do, I think we can definitely send a separate email to the squadrons just to notify them that they have a MAC in place. So definitely good feedback. Thank you, sir. Are there any other questions?
Yes, just want to confirm. You said pharmacy records still have to be, I guess, gathered by the applicant?
Yeah, because Genesis it has some pharmacy records in there, but it doesn't have everything. We've looked into it to see if Genesis actually pulls pharmacy records 100%, and MEPCOM stated that it doesn't. It just has here and there if it comes up from the hospitals being put on their records, but so they may still need to have pharmacy records pulled like they used to. But that's a process from Genesis, not on the MAC side.
Regarding how far back the MACs are going for medical records, that's all determined by the DOTI. So it's, have you had any symptoms of anxiety or depression in the past 3 years? So they can look back 3 years for that. That being said, what MEPCOM did during their Genesis training, they actually pulled up JLV and they showed the MACs this tool that the CMOs are using. And what this tool is I think it's like a word search, to put it very plainly. It's a word search through whatever is in HIE that could be considered disqualifying by MEPS standards. And so that's ultimately what they are using to identify any potential disqualifications. And within that built-in word search, it goes back as far as the DOTI dictates. So they're really limited to what the DOTI says. They're not going to go back lifetime and start digging for all the minute details that happen in this applicant's medical history.
And I did see that question about what MEPs have max in place. So we have that on the slideshow that we're going to send out that we went over. All consolidated MEPs of the 29 MEPs have max in place. And then there are a few San Antonio, Dallas, Houston that have like one. They're not full up though, so we don't really kind of see that as like they're 100% because they're just slowly getting them. But right now, the full up ones are the consolidated 29 MEPs. And then as we start training the max and getting them out to the field, we'll be notifying those MEPs and training each MEPs as they go. But there is no timeline as of yet. It's just how fast we can get them trained and get all their CAC information and their Genesis access. And once all of that's done, that's when we can start putting them to the field. Correct. Yeah. I would say that when it comes to simple stuff, let it go through the HIE pool first and then see if it's truly a simple, because what's happening right now, and this is the biggest complaint from the MEP side, is we are filling up the floors with simple pre-screens and they're not simples, they're complexes. So you have two complaints. Things take too long, but then also the same complaint is, well, it's taking too long for pre-screens to come back. So pre-screens are getting bogged down because CMOs, and a lot of MEPs are very limited to CMOs, they have to do complex pre-screens on the floor. So instead of doing all things that have been reviewed already, they have 6 simple pre-screens on the floor and all 6 were complex pre-screens. So now the CMOs have to sit there and go through them all. And then that takes them off of looking at pre-screens. So we would like for this to be simple and complex ahead of time so we can go ahead and see if there is anything in Genesis. Now, if there's not, then by all means, that's a simple. Send it forward like you normally would. This is all on the front end. So send it through the HIE first, see if it is a simple, see if it is a complex, and then we can move forward that direction. So if nothing comes up and everything's good and the Max says review's complete, nothing's changed, then send it as a simple and go ahead and schedule for MEPS. You don't have to send it as a complex at that point.
Maybe I misheard something, but it's so the Max are going to look at everything dividing into 2, simple and complex, or is it going to be by order? Because technically, then now we're going to put a simple pre-screen at the very back of the line.
Yeah, so how we're doing it is, don't consider this as like complex or simple just yet. The MAC is kind of before that point. This is as if you're planning on submitting somebody to MEPS at all, send them for an HIE pool. Again, you don't have to have the complete complex pre-screen packet or simple pre-screen packet built. The 2807 and the 680-3A-2 are what we need at a minimum for them to be able to pull Genesis. You'll need source documents in there like birth certificate, social, so the liaisons can validate that, because they'll still have to capture them into mirrors to obtain the DoD ID numbers. But then if everything comes back, like they pull HIE and nothing comes up, they'll say review complete. And at that point, the recruiter or the liaisons can submit it either as a simple and go ahead and schedule, or they can submit it as a complex. Sorry if I confused anybody diving deep into to all that, but yeah, just this is beforehand to kind of help us catch anything before we even send it.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just want to piggyback on that real quick. So when we initially briefed this process with MEPCOM, one thing that they were very excited about was actually identifying true simples. So like Sergeant Twyman said, one of the biggest complaints is simples are being submitted, but in actuality, they're pretty complex. So yeah, MEPCOM was very ecstatic for this process to truly identify simples. And so their thought process was it'll actually speed up those that are the true simples, and we'll actually be able to give the time needed appropriately to those that are truly complex.
If I may ask, with every applicant that we've utilized for the Max, what is the queue looking like right now? Or is it cleared every single day?
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, so my question is, so obviously it's first come, first served. It doesn't matter if it's simple or complex. I understand that part. So is the queue itself or the requests, are they usually cleared out within the 48 hours? Is it just continue to build up, obviously, because we have a lot of applicants? Does that mean that a true simple could possibly be kicked out about a week or two out because it hasn't gotten to that point in the queue? Or is there a pretty fast process that y'all have seen as of right now?
So that's right there is where it kind of becomes one of those deals where I'm hoping I'm understanding this the right way. So we're submitting everyone to the MAC to see if it truly is a simple, because we can say that things are simple all day until it gets pulled through Genesis, and then we find out they're not. But if it is truly a simple, that's what the MACs are trying to find out. So it's going to be put through. They're going to do the review, and the reviews only take in a day or two unless they need more records, or the DoD ID number is getting caught up, and we're working that as well. But we're trying to find out what is simple. Now, if it is truly a simple after the HIE is pulled, and it's not going to be a 10-day review like you see at the MEPS. They're just pulling HIE to see if there's anything in there. And if there is, they'll put HIE found requesting medical records. So truly it's not a simple, and that's going to be a complex. If they review it and it's good to go, you move it forward, and then you submit it as a simple. You schedule right off the bat. You don't have to sit there and wait for anything else. It's just we're trying to alleviate simples going onto the floor that are truly complexes. That's been some of the biggest pushback. So I know people just want to submit them as simples, but all MEPs have been complaining about all of these simples going onto the floor that are complexes.
Oh, yes, sir. I was just more of, thinking of actually get seen at all. Not necessarily once it starts to look see if it's truly something or not. Because you're gonna have all these other problems. That was my question. So before it even gets seen to be validated as a simple, what is the timeline of that look like? If you have one for us.
Sorry, your mic is like kind of fuzzy, so it was kind of hard to understand that.
Yeah, so my question was more in the front end before we even determine whether it's a simple or not. We say it's simple, right? But obviously the MACs are going to determine whether it's a true simple or not. But I guess my question is, what is the turnaround that you have seen that, hey, from the time that anybody submits anything, they have been able to look at their file for the very first time from that moment? So let's say I submit it today. Because of the backlog on the queue or whatever the queue may be, by what time have you seen the turnaround of that submission that was done today? Does that make sense to me?
Yeah, I got you now. Sorry. No, so there isn't really a timeline right now because like Sergeant Hardy mentioned earlier, this is the first week we have 29 MEPs on here. Now those MEPs that are solely just their one MEPs, right? Like you have a MAC just for say Harrisburg, or you have two MACs to San Antonio. Those MACs will only be working in that bucket. So that timeline is going to be based off of how fast those MACs are in those buckets. The 29 MEPs, we're still trying to figure out the timeline on that because, again, this is the first week that we've had it. And we still have a few more contractors that are being trained up to go in to fill it up. So there'll be 11 contractors in that bucket of 29 MEPs. The other MEPs will have just solely that one bucket. So we don't really have the data right now to tell you how fast the turnaround is. It's because the contractors are still training and figuring it out, and we're still working it, and we're updating it weekly and tweaking things to make it better. So we've asked the MEPs to give us feedback if they've run into any snags, things like that. Any questions, we're taking it and we're bringing it back to the team. How do we want to move forward with this? But yeah, right now we just don't have the data.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry, I made you ask that like 3 times.
It's my voice. I'm sorry.
Any other questions?
Okay, well, if there's no other questions, then we'll go ahead and close out. I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining. I think this was beneficial. Hopefully it gets the word spread a little bit more. This is very, very fast moving. So as updates occur, we'll try to keep everyone as updated as we can. But honestly, by the time updates reach you, there may already be a new update coming out. So just bear with us as we try to get the most up-to-date information out to the field. And seriously, if you guys have any questions, if you see any efficiencies, then please just let us know. You can route it up to the group core, or you can reach out to myself, and we have a team here that will all try to tackle questions and see how we can adjust this process to make it as beneficial for AFRS as we possibly can, because I think we all definitely want to see this succeed. We think it'll be very good for our recruiters. Okay, someone already answered that question. So with that, I will go ahead and close out. If anyone, I'll hang back for a couple minutes if anyone has any additional questions, but otherwise, thank you for your time today. And if you want, there's another meeting this afternoon. It'll be the same briefing, so don't feel like you need to log on to that one. Thank you, everyone.